The story begins with the fact that the main character Guts went to the city. He went into the tavern and saw how local soldiers mocked the girl. Guts, calling himself a Black Swordsman, did not tolerate this and instantly destroyed the soldiers. By nightfall, the rumor about the Black Swordsman reached the local minister, who ordered Guts to be caught. However, the ruler of the city wants to do it personally, so he destroys the minister and sets fire to the whole city. At this time, Guts was sitting quietly in the forest when suddenly his brand on his chest caught fire. He began to see hallucinations that stated that the swordsman belonged to them. Seeing the fire, he came to the burning city, where he was attacked by the ruler, who during the battle reincarnated in the form of a monster, saying that a person could not defeat him. The monster defeats him and was already ready to eat him. But the swordsman attacked him with a cannon from his hand and then finished him off with his sword. In his youth, Guts was in a detachment of mercenaries who stormed the fortress. But before them stood a knight named Bezuso, about whom there were rumors that he could destroy 30 warriors with one blow, because of which none of the mercenaries, except Guts, wanted to fight him. With his axe, Bezuso broke his helmet, but in response he was attacked in the stomach, and after Guts finishes him off with a blow to the head. After the capture of the fortress, the offensive commander offered him a permanent position in the army, but Guts did not listen to him and left. In the field, he was noticed by a detachment of Griffith, another mercenary whose members decided that it was possible to rob the swordsman. But as soon as they attack, he immediately destroys two. Griffith sent his best mercenary in the squad, Casca, to help them, but even she could not cope with him. Then the squad leader himself appeared, who with one blow was able to severely injure Guts. When he woke up, he realized that he was in a mercenary camp. Griffith approached him, he handed over the sword and asked him to follow him. Griffith said he wanted to see Guts with his squad as a warrior. However, he refuses this to him and offers a duel. If Guts wins, he will destroy Griffith, and if the opposite is true, then he can do whatever he wants with him. During the short battle, Guts began to realize that he was facing a warrior many times stronger and more experienced than him. Falling down the hill, a fight broke out, during which Griffith was able to grab Guts' arm and force him to admit defeat. At night, he was thinking about his fight when he suddenly heard that an assassination attempt was being prepared on him. He was being prepared by a corpse that was trying to rob Guts. They were about to attack, but Casca intervened and drove them away. The next night, Griffith's squad, called the Falcon Squad, prepares to attack the enemy camp. The commander tells his plan and puts Guts in charge of the rear. Casca realized that Guts was given such an important role because the commander trusted him. The detachment successfully reached the camp and set fire to it. For Guts, an enemy detachment set off in pursuit, and he decided to lead them along. During the fight, the pursuers were able to injure his horse, leaving him vulnerable. But Griffith saved him from death. He helped him get on his horse and took him to the fortress, where the rest of the detachment was waiting for the pursuers along with the cannons. After repelling an enemy attack, the squad throws a feast in honor of the newcomer, who gradually begins to join their team. In the morning, Guts comes up to Griffith and finds him washing himself, and all his attention is attracted by the necklace. Griffith says that this is Beherit, and the one who received it is destined to rule the world by giving his flesh. Then the detachment attacks the next castle. During the fight, Guts contemplates his first foray and his adoptive father, Gambino. During one of the raids, Gambino was severely injured and went insane, which is why he attacked his adopted son at night. In an attempt to defend himself, Guts himself destroys his stepfather, wanting to do so. Members of the detachment break into the chamber, and for this they decide to destroy it. However, he manages to escape on horseback, and after the capture of the castle, Guts was promoted, appointing him the commander of the strike force. 3 years have passed since these events. The Falcon Squad has become even stronger. They now serve the King of Midland, who knights Griffith. This is extremely dissatisfied with the local commanders, but they understand that they cannot cope without the Falcon detachment. After the ceremony, they receive a new task, to capture the enemy's supply depot. It is guarded by the knight Aidan, who escapes when Griffin's squad breaks into the vault. But he managed to prepare a trap. The vault was filled with explosives, which were set on fire during the retreat. However, even after this, no one was hurt in the Falcon detachment. In the evening, Aidan reports to his boss, General Boskin, that he was able to destroy the Falcon Squad. But the general recognized the lie in his words, and therefore sends him back. At this time, the king is going to send a detachment on an important task, namely the capture of the castle. But this is unhappy with the military leaders, who are now plotting to destroy Griffith. Guts' strike force besieges the main tower, but the strong warrior Zodd Nosferatu, who was considered defeated, fights on the side of the enemy. 50 warriors of the Guts detachment went to battle with him, but no one returned, so he decides to go there himself. Entering the tower, Guts finds this warrior and immediately starts the fight. The Nosferatu proves to be the most powerful enemy Guts has ever faced. To destroy it, he has to use his long blade at full power. Thanks to this, he was able to break the monster's sword and injure him badly. But he transforms into a stronger form. Now even Guts cannot do anything to him, and is already losing all his strength. But at the last moment, Griffith and his crossbowmen intervened, who distracted the monster towards themselves. Griffith rushes to Guts, and only together they manage to damage the monster's hand, but this was not enough. The Nosferatu was already ready to destroy Griffith, but upon seeing the Beherit, the monster changes its plans. He turns to Guts and prophesies the future for him. If Griffith fails to achieve his goal, then Guts will be destined to leave this world. After these words, the monster flies away. The castle has been captured, causing the king to want to promote Griffith. After healing, Griffith asks Guts how they escaped. What the swordsman points to Beherit, but he did not say about the prophecy. Instead, Guts asks why he saved him 3 years ago, trying to figure out his ulterior motive. But there was no reason Griffith saved him because he wanted to. Their conversation is interrupted by the king. He directly says that the commanders do not like the Falcon Squad, and all because they are commoners, but the king himself does not see this as a problem, because their squad copes much better than the royal ones. The next day, Aidan explains to the soldiers that the fortress they are currently in is impregnable, because the only way to get into it is through a narrow bridge with a bunch of soldiers. And it is this fortress that the Falcon Squad will have to capture. Members of Guts' strike force use ropes to ferry horses and supplies across the river. Now, in order to attack the fortress, they do not need to enter this bridge. While the rest of the Falcon Squad stood on the hill, thereby attracting attention, Aidan realized that this was a trap designed to bring all the guards to the bridge, so he ordered them to be ignored. At this time, Guts came in from the rear and said that their commander-in-chief was about to arrive, and that he had a message for their commander. The plan succeeded and the gates were opened. After that, the main strike force ran out of the forest. Since no one could have thought that Guts was an imposter, he and his team managed to clear the bridge and signal Griffith to advance. Aidan realized that he lost, so he runs away again, which means that another fortress has been captured. After such a successful operation, Griffith receives the status of an earl, but the younger brother of the king, Julius, did not like it very much. For him, the last straw was the change in the accompanying detachment of the king during the spring hunt. Instead of the squad of Julius, the squad of the Falcon will be the escort. It was then that Julius decided to destroy Griffith. His advisor Foss hinted that stray arrows can often fly on the hunt, and it is better to make one such arrow poisoned. On the hunt, Griffith notices that Princess Charlotte does not like being here, so he decides to talk to her. During the conversation, a wild boar runs out of the bushes, which frightens the princess's horse with its appearance, and she runs away into the forest. Griffith sets off in pursuit of her, followed by a hired hunter. He dismounted from his horse to stop and calm the princess's horse, after which he was destroyed by a hunter. At least the mercenary himself thought so. In fact, although the arrow pierced the armor, it was stopped by Beherit. Griffith realized that it was an assassination attempt. Now he and the squad will have to find out who is behind this. Suspicion fell on Julius, as he was seen very close and watched everything that happened. Then Griffith asks Guts to destroy the king's brother. He determined what kind of poison was on the arrow. This poison is very expensive and rare, so an ordinary bandit will not be able to purchase it. He also bribed the maid to find out everything. Guts starts spying on Julius, who is training his son. After training, the father went to his chambers, where Guts later came. Julius did not even have time to grab his sword, as he was already destroyed. And it was at this moment that his son came to them. Guts could not leave the witness, and therefore dealt with him. At this time, Griffith was at the ball. Guts meets him during a conversation with Charlotte. He tells her that he has no friends among his squad because they all rely on his dream. A person who can become his friend must have his own dream for which he should live. They are overheard by Guts, who is offended by these words. At this moment, a maid bursts into the conversation between the princess and Griffith, who reports the death of Julius and his son. The next day, Griffith is sent on a new mission, the battle with the detachment of Adon. Right before he leaves, the princess gives him a talisman, God's Stone, which shows her sympathy. After that, her mother makes a stern remark to her saying that the princess cannot communicate, let alone give something to ordinary people. Upon arrival, the battle began. Adon himself drove up to Casca saying that a woman can never be considered a knight, and therefore he wants to destroy her. During the fight, Casca was cornered and Adon was about to destroy her. But Guts intervenes. He was able to deflect his strong blow with one blow, break his helmet and throw him off his horse. Guts, thinking that the enemy no longer has strength, is distracted by Casca, and at that moment he receives an arrow. Together with her, he falls into the water, and the wound was not so deep. Guts was able to pull her to shore and revive her with CPR. However, due to the fever, she never woke up. Because of the beginning rain, Guts could not return to the squad, so they spent the night in a cave. Waking up, Guts asks why she joined the Falcon Squad, to which Casca began to tell her story. She was born in a distant and poor village, past which a nobleman was passing. He liked the helmet, and so he invited her family to make her their servant, promising her a happy life. But it turned out that he ransomed her to make his slave. However, Griffith intervened at the last moment. He gave Casca a sword, with which she destroyed the nobleman. And after that, she wanted to join his squad. Then the Falcon detachment intervened in the territorial conflict, which was started by the local ruler, Governor Jenin. He had a bad reputation for recruiting children as servants, but in reality he used them as slaves. According to Casca, after one of the battles, Griffith spent the night with the governor. She asked her commander why he did it. The reason was simple. Griffith needed money to support the army. Casca also reveals why she was mad at Guts all this time. During their first meeting, Griffith insisted on his joining the squad, when, like no one else, he did not invite. During the night, Casca and Guts set out to find their crew. But Adon was waiting for them with his detachment. He said that the swordsman was a big problem for him, and so he directed his entire remaining squad against them. However, this did not stop Guts and Casca, so Adon called his brother Samson. His weapon is able to break even logs, and his armor is 3 times thicker than that of other soldiers. Guts uses his sword to deflect the enemy's weapon, which eventually breaks under pressure. After disarming the enemy, the swordsman destroys him, and then tells Casca to leave him and run, since she is sick and cannot fight. Despite the fact that Guts distracted the entire squad, still several soldiers were sent after Casca. They were able to grab her and were about to have fun with her. But at the last moment, she was able to stick a branch in the soldier's eye and escape. By a lucky chance, she resorts to her squad, which saves her. At this time, Guts continues to fight with the warriors of Adon, with whom he fought until dawn. He was found barely alive and immediately carried back to the camp. In the evening, Griffith's confidant, Judo, tells Casca that all the nobility were against searching for her and Guts, but it was Griffith who insisted on finding them, saying that they were the most important members of his squad. Judo also gives away his very rare and expensive medicine, saying that Guts needs it more. Guts then reveals that his battle with 100 soldiers is nothing compared to what she and Griffith do for the squad. He argued that everyone in the squad has their own goal, but all these goals are alien to Guts. He does not know what he wants from life, and perhaps soon he will leave their squad to go further. Griffith has returned from a military meeting where the king has instructed a detachment to capture the castle owned by Jenin. It was besieged by the White Tiger Knights, and this is one of the strongest armies, but they could not succeed and were defeated by the army of the castle. At this time, Adon is deprived of his position. General Boscon then visits Jenin, saying that they will soon be fighting Falcon's squad, adding that he needs Griffith alive. The day of the battle has come. Griffith divided his 5,000-strong army into 2 formations. The plan was for the first formation, commanded by Guts, to go through the enemy army and destroy its commanders. During the battle, the governor realizes that Boscon might disobey his orders and destroy Griffith, so he personally plans to move to the battlefield for command. After destroying part of the castle's army, Griffith ordered a retreat and regroup. Boscombe understood his plan, and therefore was not going to go in pursuit. But then Genin intervenes, who takes command, and once again orders to deliver Griffith alive and pursue his squad. The entire army set off in pursuit of Griffith, leaving the castle almost unguarded. This was taken advantage of by the second formation under the command of Casca, who managed to break into the castle almost without resistance. During the capture, Casca again meets with Adon, who, despite being removed from his post, was able to lead the squad and surround the second formation. A battle broke out in the castle, as a result of which Casca was able to drive Adon to a standstill, saying that she could not do this earlier because she did not say hello. Realizing his hopelessness, the former commander admitted his mistakes and began to ask for mercy. Casca let her guard down, which he took advantage of and attacked her with a crossbow. Adon cornered her, but Casca was able to pull him apart and dodge the spear attack. Then Casca decided to counterattack and hurt his face. Meanwhile, outside the castle walls, the first formation is fighting the main army. Guts single-handedly deals with a large number of soldiers, but General Boscombe appears in front of him, and the battle of two strong warriors begins. The whole fight was complicated by the deplorable state of Guts' weapons because his sword was badly worn out. At this moment, he realizes that he has never been so close to leaving for another world. Realizing that Guts will not cope with the general without a good weapon, Zodd throws his sword at him, which determines the outcome of the entire battle. After the destruction of the general, Genin finally saw that his castle had already been captured and that he and his soldiers were surrounded on two sides. The entire army of the castle scatters, leaving their governor, to whom Griffith approaches and destroys him. In Midland, high-ranking officials learned of the capture of the castle by Griffith. Now he can be promoted to the position of general, which was the reason for the second assassination attempt. The decision was made to poison Griffith, led by Councillor Foss and supported by the Queen herself. Griffith's party returned to the Midlands, where the people welcomed them as heroes. At this time, the Queen and Foss were preparing for today's ball, at which they planned to poison him. During the ball, Casca asks Guts why he came, because he used to skip balls, to which the swordsman replied that he wanted to see what Griffith achieves in the future. At this point, Casca realizes that Guts wants to lead their squad. Without having time to talk normally, the king appears with his speech, who is going to give the Falcon Detachment the title of White Knights and appoint Griffith himself the Earl and commander of all the armies of the Midland. After the speech, Foss and the rest of the conspirators are going to fulfill their plan. They poured poison into the wine, and one of the conspirators, disguised as a servant, offered the drink to Griffith. The king made a toast, whereupon Griffith falls dead. After the end of the ball, the dummy servant galloped out of the kingdom into the forest, where Guts was already waiting for him. Meanwhile, everyone else responsible for Griffith's destruction has gathered at the chapel to celebrate the success. The participants in the conspiracy wondered if the bogus servant would tell someone their names, to which Foss says that he has already been dealt with, and then leaves the chapel. After a while, the floor beneath them began to smoke. Someone started a fire in the chapel, and all the conspirators were trapped. The Queen ran to the window and saw Griffith standing in the street. It turns out that instead of wine, he drank a special tincture that puts a person in a state similar to destruction. So even the doctor did not understand that he was alive. After that, Foss turns to Griffith and asks how he knew about the conspiracy, but Griffith didn't know for sure. During their first meeting, Griffith realized that the advisor would become his enemy. As insurance, Griffith hired mercenaries to take the counselor's daughter hostage, which was dealt with by Guts. After that, they both returned to their squad. And the next day, the Queen's funeral took place, and Guts leaves the Falcon squad early in the winter. Casca notices this and runs after him. While he wants to see what Griffith achieves, he doesn't want to live under someone else's dream. They are approached by Judo and Corcus, who go with him to the tavern to discuss everything. And Casca decides to call Griffith. Guts tells them his little backstory about how he destroyed his stepfather as a child. And from that moment on, he did not try to find out anything other than the fight. Guts wants to be on a par with Griffith, namely to achieve something himself. Corcus does not understand him, because according to him, in life you always have to make compromises. After that, Corcus leaves, and Judo tells his story. From childhood, he honed his skills with daggers and swords, which is why he now owns them in the detachment better than anyone else. But he could not learn anything else. He went after Griffith because he saw him as his leader, and so as not to consider himself somehow special. After these words, Judo decides to see off Guts. Leaving the city, they are met by Casca and his friends. They all came to see Guts off. Griffith suddenly intervenes and reminds the swordsman that because of the duel he lost, Guts is his and now they must fight. Before the battle, Guts realizes that their duel shows how valuable they are to each other. Griffith sees that Guts doesn't want to fight, but just can't let him go. Guts took the fight as a tribute, while Griffith was willing to either keep it to himself or destroy it. The outcome of the battle was decided instantly. Guts broke Griffith's sword with one blow, after which he said goodbye and left. Griffith was not ready for this. This defeat hit him very hard. Then he came to the chambers of the princess and secluded herself with her. This was noticed by the maid and called the guards. On this day, Griffith was deprived of his post and sentenced to torture. Guts traveled around the cities and participated in tournaments. After one of these, he decided to visit the blacksmith Godao, who forged a new sword for him. The blacksmith says that the sword can be used to determine who its owner is and who he fought. About the Guts sword, we can say that it is held by a person who does not see his fate. For some time, he lived with Godao, improving his fighting skills, at the same time thinking about his words about a man who does not see his fate. Guts asks why Godao works as a blacksmith. He does it because he doesn't know anything else. All his life he wanted to become the best in his field, but when he was already an old man. After a year of training and living with a blacksmith, Guts moves on. But before leaving, a messenger arrives to the blacksmith, who talks about robbers hiding in the mountains, mentioning that Casca is their commander. Guts immediately went looking for them. He arrived just as the bounty hunters attacked the camp and helped repulse their attack. Judo tells Guts about that day. They were waiting for Griffith when suddenly they were attacked by the Midland Army, and all because Griffith was accused of treason. Jujo says that they plan to free him from captivity, and the fact that Guts joined them is a great success. Meanwhile, Griffith was constantly tortured. The executioner says that the king strictly ordered to keep Griffith alive for another 3 years. Then he plucks Beharit from the prisoner and throws him out. Guts and Casca move away from the camp where she attacks him. Casca blames him for all the troubles because their commander could go further without him. Hearing this, Guts missed a blow and was wounded. However, having wounded him, Casca realized that he was not to blame for anything. And Griffith himself all this time wanted to break through to the throne through the heart of the princess. But for her it was unbearable, because Casca loved him, but she understood that they were not destined to be together. She walked to the edge of the cliff, saying she was tired, and made a jump. However, Guts managed to save her. The next day, he says he will free Griffith and put the squad back on their feet. After his motivating words, they went to save the commander. Griffith had a vision where he saw black silhouettes that say they are his blood relatives. At night, Rickard went to the lake to draw water for the sick and wounded, when he suddenly saw a ferry, but he heard screams from the detachment. Running there, he saw how the entire camp was empty, and the last members of the detachment were being eaten by monsters. At this time, the heroes arrived at the cemetery to the secret passage. Arriving at the tower of the dungeon, the detachment destroys the soldiers and descends to Griffith. There, they discover a barely alive body, as its tendons and tongue were damaged. The door to the cell is closed by the executioner, who has already called all the guards here. This door is 4 times stronger than ordinary doors, but even so, Guts took out the door with one blow and wounded the executioner. All that remains for them now is to break through with the fight along with Griffith. As a result, they managed to go through a secret passage to the cemetery, where a wagon was waiting for them, but the guards had already gone after them. The king's army had already begun to catch up with them, but the archers prepared in advance were able to reduce the number of soldiers. But even this was not enough. The army commander took Griffith and showed everyone his exhausted body. He began to say that Griffith would never be able to fight again, but he was immediately destroyed by Guts. Having fought off the army, the detachment stopped in the field, not knowing what to do next. They all hoped that by returning Griffith, everything would be as before. Guts, during a conversation with Judo, says that he wanted to help the squad and save Griffith, but then he will again leave to look for his way. At that moment, a former member of the shock squad that Guts commanded earlier comes to him and asks him to take them with him. And only now Guts realized that all this time he was mistaken. What he was looking for all his life is the detachment from which he left, but he realized this when he lost everything. While sleeping, Griffith had another vision. In it, he saw himself safe and sound, pointing to his dream, a white castle. He then sees himself as a child running towards the castle. Griffith comes to his senses and starts his wagon in pursuit of himself. However, the wagon hits a rock and overturns. He has another dream where he is sitting at a table with his wife Casca and their son Guts. Finally, Griffith comes to his senses and decides to leave for another world. In the water, he finds his Beherit. The entire squad rush towards him, but at that moment an eclipse sets in, and various monsters began to appear around. Guts runs up to him, and at that moment, the Beherit is activated, which covered the entire earth and sky with red faces. Casca commands the entire squad to get into battle formation. At this moment, the monsters say that a feast has come during the eclipse, and now 4 guardian angels will appear. And at the moment when he acquired Beherit, he had the right to become the 5th angel. Also, all the demons at some time in the past were humans who tried to use Beherit. However, in order for Griffith to become one of the angels, a sacrifice is needed, which will be the Falcon Squad. Griffith has a choice. He can sacrifice them to become a deity or refuse, and everything will be as before. He sees the vision again. In it, he, being a little boy, runs to his dream, a white castle with his friends, but for some reason they are nowhere to be found. He got lost and asked his grandmother for directions, who showed him the right way. But when he arrived, there was no castle in front of him. Instead of a castle, there was a mountain of human remains, and the grandmother says that this is the only way to his dream. To do this, he must step over those who fought for his dream, or fall with them. After these words, the grandmother points to his friend, who was badly wounded, and then he sees the rest of the squad members, who have long been destroyed. In a sense, Griffith destroyed everyone, because if it were not for his dream, they would not have fallen during the fighting. Grandmother says that he has already been through a lot, but he still has to go through for the sake of his dream. And if he wants to return everything back, he will lie next to the human remains. Griffith realizes his position and makes a decision. He sacrifices his entire squad, after which he is consumed by faces. All party members receive a brand that serves as a mark for monsters. Guts tried to break the faces and get to Griffith to save him, but he had already begun his reincarnation. Meanwhile, Pippin sacrifices himself, drawing the monsters to himself, while Judo takes Casca and tries to take her away. However, their horse is trapped and Judo is destroyed. Monsters surrounded Casca, who want to destroy her. The last one left alive is Guts, who continues to fight, but he too was surrounded and grabbed by the arm. The monsters were already ready to destroy Casca and Guts, but at that moment Griffith ended his rebirth and appeared before them in a new guise. If you want to continue, then write about it in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, like and press the bell so as not to miss new videos. AniMap was with you. Bye everyone!